Thanksgiving, the holiday in which we are most grateful and give thanks to all the wonderful things within our lives. For me, that would include the fact that I'm able to create videos for you guys and make content that you can enjoy, as well as look forward to somebody who's like a friend of yours being able to talk about books and episodes, shows, and movies that you enjoy. There's also the fact that I'm grateful that I told my bill collector that I moved to Papua New Guinea and opened up a fish market so that way I could avoid paying that water bill every month. He thinks I'm over there racking up the paper. That's not the case, all right? At least I'm not racking up the bills anymore, as far as I'm concerned. And then there's also the fact that I'm grateful that I'm no longer with my ex Feifei, because she used to accuse me of cheating on her all the time, and her solution to that was putting habanero chili powder within my boxers. Yeah, safe to say every time I see a Serena Vincent film now, I get phantom pains. But with that aside, I'm here to talk about the horror books that I've read across my life that I am most grateful for reading because they changed my perspective on what the peak of horror can be. They hit different genres that I enjoy, and I think that they would change your perception if you got the chance to read them. So I thought I'd share them with you today. So hopefully you check them out. Hopefully you check out this video, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It's Thanksgiving, might as well give out your thanks and be grateful, so hit those two as well. And then let me know your own thoughts and opinions. What are the 5 kids horror books, or even horror books in general if you read everything, that you're grateful for having to check out? So yeah, without further ado, let's get into this video. So I'm going to be listing off the 5 books that I am most grateful for being able to read across the years that I've been alive, thankfully. And these may not necessarily be my specific favorites of all time, but I decided to at least pick a diverse list that hits off some of the things that I'm looking for when it comes to horror books and ones that have changed my perspective going forward. Now, what does change my perspective means? Well, broaden my horizons on stuff that I would really enjoy reading, as well as using these as the peak mediums to compare similar books to and see if I enjoy them. And you'll figure out what I'm talking about as the list goes on. So, the first book that I wanted to talk about is obviously Goosebumps related, because Goosebumps is obviously one of my most favorite kids horror series that are out there, probably the most influential within my life, one that I watched a lot as a kid, especially with the TV show, and I collected all the Goosebumps books from my library just because I love the Tim Jacobus covers, and I love the fact that kids horror books like these existed. So, the very first book on my top 5 horror books that I'm most grateful for list would be, accordingly, the very first Goosebumps book that officially came out and dropped, which happens to be my favorite from that series, and that is none other than Welcome. Even the lighter won't give out. The lighter needs to build up, all right? This is straight fire. Let's see. There we go. Welcome to Dead House. That is the very first book on my list. Now, Welcome to Dead House was the first official Goosebumps book that came out, and obviously it sparked the foundations for what was going to come next, because since then we've had hundreds of Goosebumps books that have dropped, a lot of episode adaptations with the old show and the new show, forget about that one, as well as movies. And yeah, this is one of my favorite Goosebumps books of all time. It's my favorite OG62 book that I've read so far, and easily the reason because of the status of this book to me is simply because it's the scariest Goosebumps book that I have read. It has a super dark atmosphere throughout it. It has one of the darkest concepts in Goosebumps. The fact that you have this entire town who is full of the undead, and it's all because of this chemical accident that led to everybody dying in it. The population are all basically undead and wanting fresh souls to take over and force other people as victims into their lives that they were forced into. You have really dark body horror and some gruesome scenes in there of violence and gore, which is not seen often in Goosebumps. You have people's bodies melting, body parts falling off. You have the creepy tones and atmosphere of the fact that the main characters see people within their house in the dark corners of their room in nightmares, and basically, you know, the house might be haunted, it might be getting broken into, you're not really sure what's going on. The fact that the town is super dark all the time, the sun never shines there, and you have these terrifying dream sequences where the main character sees her family as these decrepit, decaying skeletons eating these rotten bones on a table. Very, very dark stuff. And you have some deaths which happen in the book to certain people and certain creatures as well. That is quite gruesome, quite dark. And yeah, this is one of the scariest Goosebumps books out there. I really have to respect what Stein did with it, and I understand why this book sparked controversy amongst society when it dropped, because of the fact that it's so dark and that this was promoted as a kids horror book. I swear to you, even if you're an adult or you're a young adult or a teenager, if you read this book, you're probably going to get unsettled by it, and you're going to be a little bit taken aback by the fact that this is a kids horror book, because it has a lot of dark stuff in there, a lot of gruesome stuff in there, and even Stein said that this is one of the scariest books he's ever written, and I understand why. And when I read this for the first time, I was shocked by that, and it became one of my favorites. I think this book is timeless. I think it can scare many different people, not just kids. And yeah, this is the very first book on my list that I'm grateful for reading. And of course, it has to be the first Goosebumps book that luckily was a super fire entry into the series and overall changed the game. So shout out to Welcome to Dead House. And the second book on my list is going to be another R.L. Stein book. However, this will not be from the Goosebumps series. Instead, it'll be a short story collection that overall changed my perspective, because this is one of my favorite short story collections I've read from kids horror. I think it has great diversity. I think it's quite terrifying at certain times. I think it has a lot of creative ideas. And this book, from the title and the bundle that it comes in, basically inspired one of my favorite kids horror TV shows to ever come out, and has some of my favorite stories and episodes that came from it. So the next one that I'm going to be talking about is R.L. Stein's short story collection, not from Goosebumps, but from a standalone, which is none other than The Haunting Hour. That's right, The Haunting Hour short story collection. Now, the Haunting Hour short story collection is basically a short story collection of different kids' horror stories that R.L. Stein wrote, not affiliated with any specific book or series. And overall, I thought it was quite scary, it's quite creative, it's quite entertaining. And of course, from the title, it inspired the Haunting Hour TV series, although I think only one story from this short story collection was actually adapted into the Haunting Hour TV show. The Nightmare Hour and the Haunting Hour were dropped basically in this kind of like bundle/sequel thing to each other, and the Nightmare Hour had much more stories that were adapted in the show, but again, these two are kind of responsible for the inspiration behind the show's existence. And obviously there was a story from here that was adapted, so it is integral to the show's creation. And the Haunting Hour is one of my favorite kids horror TV shows to ever exist. I thought it had fantastic variety. I thought it was super scary at times. I thought it had iconic villains, great stories, a lot of creativity, some great actors in there, and some of my favorite kids horror stories in general, whether it be books or episodes, specifically comes from that media, the Haunting Hour TV show. And this short story collection is my favorite short story collection for kids horror, because it's overall very consistent. It has a lot of bangers and fire stories in there. Some of them include the Halloween dance. You have, I think, the Bad Babysitter or something involving that one terrible babysitter. It's the second story in the book. It's been a while since I read it, but I remember some stories from there. You have The Snowman, which is basically a story about fear itself and the idea of pranks going too far. You have My Imaginary Friend, which was adapted into the Haunting Hour TV show, and that's quite a deep story, quite a dark story by the end of it, and I thought it was pretty well done. And you also have a story called Losers, which is about these two kids who go to a local town fair. They start insulting the people for their looks, start calling people freaks, and when they find out this secret place in the fair, they realize that there may be quite a deeper cult-like thing going on within this fair that deals with circus freak shows of its own. Quite a dark and, might I say, messed up story. So yeah, I love this short story collection. It has a lot of creativity in it, has a lot of great stories. I thought it was pretty well written. I thought it had some scary concepts in there. It's darker than Goosebumps. It goes down some darker routes, deals with some stuff, again, you would see in the Haunting Hour. And the fact that it's willing to go darker The fact that it's willing to have, a little bit more creative ideas, have a nice variety, and the fact that Stein is willing to actually, make well-written stories that resonate with you, have some great characters in it, have some darker moments, some scarier moments to stick with you. I think this short story collection does a great job overall, especially compared to stuff like Tales to Give You Goosebumps, which oftentimes ends up being forgettable or mediocre stories. This one is a really solid collection, and I thought it was a big step up from the Nightmare Hour. So shout out to the Haunting Hour short story collection. That's number 2 on my list. Now, number 3. What is number 3 on my list of horror books that I'm grateful for having to read? Well, going along the lines of short story collections, there is a short story collection for young adults and kids. A lot of kids read this short story collection. There's a lot of young adults and adults who read this book and they still get terrified to this day. A lot of the times because of the really dark content that their surprise managed to make it into kids' horror audiences. And the idea that these illustrations resonate with you throughout your life. Some of the darkest, scariest, most nightmarish, horrific illustrations that add so much more to the urban legends and stories included within this book. And if you can't figure out what I'm talking about scary stories to tell in the dark. Now, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is one of the most influential horror books that I've read within my life. It got me introduced into my love of short story collections, especially horror short story collections. I love this book. I love urban legends in general, so the fact that this book is able to capture urban legends, some of the scariest and darkest around the country, overall allowed me to get introduced to a lot of great short stories. I think the illustrations by Stephen Gamel are some of the darkest, most scariest illustrations and drawings you could ever see in your life. And even as an adult when I was 20 years old or 19 and I was reading this book for the first time in a long time, I read it after, a decade or longer. I read this back in elementary school for the first time when I picked it up at my school library. And the story behind it was I brought it home when it was kind of like winter or late fall. And it got dark really fast, so I entered my house. My mom used to leave me alone at the house for like some hours at a time because she had to go to work, and I was in her mind old enough, even at elementary, that I could handle myself. I was a good kid. I didn't go out and cause trouble, so she trusted me. And as soon as I got this book, I brought it home. I turned off all the lights in the house except for the main, I think, living room light. And not my main living room light, but there's a light by the front door in my living room, which is like this orange light that kind of lights up the living room enough that the corners are, covered in darkness and the middle is kind of dark, but you can at least see around, the living room and kind of read. So I was using that light, being close to it, and reading this book, and it terrified me. This book is absolutely terrifying, and when I read it as an adult, in the daylight, on my college campus with people around me, it was still creeping me out. I mean, these are some scary stories. You have stories in there like the one about the toe, where a kid, steals a toe, uses it for supper, and then something comes to get its toe back. You have the story about the Wendigo. The Wendigo is probably the longest story in this one, and it's super creepy, has a really eerie drawing about this winter setting with footsteps in this wintry forest covered in snow. The Wendigo is a super dark and eerie story where you hear, it's about this hunter, I believe, who walks with this Native American guide in this wintry forest late in the winter. I should say snowy forest in the winter, wintry forest in the winter. This is late, y'all. My mind's kind of getting scrambled a bit, late night hours. But perfect to talk about this book. So he basically goes into this snowy forest in the winter, and he swears that he can hear the Native American's name being chanted through the wind, breezing through the trees. Super eerie, super creepy. There's a crazy ending that's super kind of dark and scary and super ominous that kind of resonated with me. And to be fair, even if I had to make a caveat, there's a lot of from the trilogy of scary stories, there's a lot of creepy stories that resonate with me. Harold is one of my favorite, scary short stories that I read. Really, really enjoyed Harold. You have the one about the New York apartment involving paranormal activity and possibly, telepathy and telekinesis powers being invoked within people since birth. Stuff like that is super interesting to me. You have Wonderful Sausage, a super disgusting and creepy story. Yeah, there's a lot of stories in here that freak me out, that scare me, and I think it does a great job. So, scary stories that tell in the dark, some of the scariest illustrations, some of the best urban legends collected within the book, and I think it's a timeless classic. Shout out to Alvin Schwartz and Stephen Gamel for making such a masterpiece, in my opinion. And I think even as a young adult, teenager, or full-grown adult, this story will freak you out a little bit. And yeah, quite creepy and quite timeless. So it's number 3 on my list. Now, number 4 is actually going to be a Goosebumps knockoff. And the reason why this is number 4 on my list, this Goosebumps knockoff managed to surprise me in so many ways. It was such a dark and scary read. It has one of my favorite ideas. It is such a well-written book that I imagined this book being adapted into a movie and like being super popular, being super well made. This felt like I was watching a movie the whole time. I love some of the adult elements to this book, some of the creepy things that are included in there. The final chapter to this book is one of the realest situations you could ever read in kids horror, and it is so dark, it is so creepy. The final like couple paragraphs to this last chapter in the book is some of the darkest, scariest shit I've ever seen in my life. Poor phrasing of words, shit. All right, this is some crazy ass fucking dog shit. That's the best way I could put it. And yeah, this book is none other than Spine Tinglers. Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried. Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried was the very first Spine Tinglers book that I read. I just decided to pick it up randomly because I thought the title was interesting. I thought it might be a good starting point, and I did not imagine that I would love this book as much as I truly did. This book deals with a kid whose dog recently passed away. He's having a really hard time dealing with this dog moving on to the afterlife, dying. It's really hard on him. He had to move away with his mom to this new town. He's been having a hard time fitting in, and this dog was like his best friend. Obviously, now he's lost him, and he's having a really hard time dealing with the grieving process. However, during the time when the dog was passing away and the doctor tried to save his life, all the lights in the room started flickering and the storm was going on, and he saw this look in his dog's eyes that freaked him out. He didn't know what it meant. He didn't know what kind of omen it led to, but something freaked him out. And as the story progresses, you find out a little bit more about this town, this creepy cult-like church that exists within it, which is like the Church of the Undead Pets or something. Super, super creepy. And yeah, let's just say Billy Baker's dog may not be staying buried for long, and a lot of things may not be staying buried within this town. This was a super apocalyptic kind of book dealing with a lot of the undead. It was super creepy. You had a lot of kind of creepy scenes, and I thought the very first scene with Billy Baker's dog, and the situation involving it was all right, but then the book just kept picking up. The thing about this book is it keeps picking up and picking up and picking up and becoming better and better. More and more action, more and more scary stuff, more and more intense stakes. You have all these basically undead pets and animals attacking people, trying to kill anybody who's wronged them, going after sometimes their owners who neglected and abused them, and basically it's revenge of the undead pets. It is super scary. You have people being attacked, there's gore, there's blood, and you have this basically town uprising that's going on in tandem with this, where Billy Baker's becoming the target of it, his family's becoming stuck within this, the people that he loves and care about are turning on him and kind of basically switching up on him, deciding who they should side with. And the final chapter in this book is the most realistic conclusion to a kid's horror book that I've read. It's something that would happen in real life. It makes the most logical sense. It's super dark and twisted, and it's kind of deep. And then the very final part of the book is creepy. I imagined this scene happening in real life, and I was like, dude, this is like some Cujo kind of stuff. This is like some dark adult horror stuff done within a kid's horror book and formatted to fit that story structure. So I thought this book was fantastic. Billy Baker's Dog got a perfect score out of me. I thought it was absolutely great, and I would suggest you all go check it out. Luckily, this was the first Spine Tinglers book I read, but it set a precedent, or precedents, for basically Goosebumps knockoffs and what they could be. And I thought this was one of the best kids horror books that I've ever read. And honestly, this book sets the record for any future kids horror book that I read, because if there's a kids horror book trying to be darker and trying to be more adult-like while keeping the kids horror format, this is the perfect version of how to do it. And I absolutely love this book. So Billy Baker's Dog Won't Stay Buried from Spine Tinglers is my number 4. And finally, my 5th horror book that I want to talk about, which is not related to kids horror, not related to young adult horror. This is a full-on adult horror book. And this one, to me, is still the best horror book that I've read so far. It has some of my favorite stories. It has some of my favorite types of writing. It has some of my favorite horror within it, whether it be body horror, whether it be apocalyptic situations, whether it be terrifying villains and monsters, whether it be terrifying concepts. I think this is the best representation of the author's work. Short story format done in very concise, creepy ways, and I thought this was a smash hit. Super fantastic, almost a masterpiece in my opinion, when I look in the grand scheme of things. And that is number 5 by Stephen King, his very first short story collection, Night Shift. That's the lighters on his last breath. Night Shift by Stephen King has some of my favorite horror short stories in all of existence that I've read so far. It has 20 stories. They're all great. They're all memorable pretty much. Even the few that I gave lower scores to, in hindsight, I'm going to bump them up because they at least had very creative ideas to them that have resonated with me for a long time. Some of my absolute favorite stories from here include the first one, Jerusalem's Lot, which is written as a love note to H.P. Lovecraft. It deals with this guy who moves into this family home that has been inherited to him. It's kind of like this haunted manor place. And as he enters it, he finds out that the town in which this house is located, the entire villagers basically shun him, treat him like an outcast, treat him like this, witchcraft, black magic kind of guy. They throw stones at him. They want him to stay away from him. He's not understanding why this, house has garnered him this type of reputation. And he writes these letters to his friend, which basically tell his whole story. And he starts finding out the weird stuff that happens in this house. He discovers this super creepy abandoned town section in this village that has some satanic stuff in it, that has some super dark material. You have some Lovecraft type of deities and monsters involved. You have some terrifying descriptions of him going down in the basement and seeing these things that are super dark, super twisted, and it's a fantastic story overall. Super creepy, and I believe it led to a sequel book called Salem's Lot, and then another short story at the end of this book, which is a prequel. You also have I Am the Doorway, which is one of my favorite short story concepts of all time. Basically, this astronomer, this astronaut goes to, I think, Venus during an expedition, and he comes back with this extraterrestrial virus, a virus from outer space. I don't know how you say it, extraterrestrial virus. And he basically gets discharged. He has to write confidentiality forms. And as he tries to retire and move on, he finds out that these things are growing on his body. And they are eyes. Eyes are growing on the palm of his hands. And they are essentially doorways that allow aliens from this planet to view our world. So aliens are viewing the earth and the human world through the palm of his hands, through these eyeballs growing on it. And they start causing havoc, taking lives, influencing his life. And when he tries to get rid of the problem in one of the most dark ways possible, he finds out that the body horror and the true destruction is not yet done. Quite dark. You also have The Boogeyman, which is a perfect short story. The Boogeyman is my favorite horror short story of all time so far that I've read. It's about this guy who's at this therapist appointment, and he's basically telling the story about how he murdered his 3 kids. And as he starts discussing the story, you find out this unstable, crazy, kind of racist, sexist kind of guy might be onto something, because he says that he's not the one who killed his kids. The boogeyman is the one who killed the kids. And you find out the story about what happened to each of his kids, the progressively more terrifying stuff he went through involving this boogeyman figure. Whether it's real or not, you have to find out. And yeah, super terrifying, super creepy. And the twist ending has thrown some people off, but I love the twist ending because it adds layers to the villain and adds layers to the story, and I absolutely loved it. A masterpiece. You also have stories in here that are not as good but super memorable. Trucks, killer vehicles. Stephen King loves writing about killer vehicles, too much, in my opinion. But this is one of the best ones about vehicles that basically come to life and turn on humans. They start killing them. You have these great scenes involving trucks and bulldozers, and you have this ending to the book that really, ending to the story that really stuck with me, which involves, kind of like this, apocalyptic world and dystopia that they're living in, and how far it could really go. Very reflective, very deep, very thought-provoking for such a silly kind of story. You also have, I believe, I forgot what it was called, but it's a short story about this killer industrial washing machine that may or may not be haunted. And it's such a well-written kind of mystery. It's written in a super dark way, has basically these police officers and detectives investigating these crimes where people died and they're chalked up as accidents. But as these people start investigating, they start realizing maybe there might be more than meets the eye. And you have this super dark kind of story at hand. And it is goofy in terms of the concept, but the way it's written about the horror and gore is super well done. And the way it's written, it's a very well written story. I love the writing in this story. It's very well written for such a silly concept. And the ending is so over the top that I couldn't help but smile. You also have, I think, Battlegrounds, which is about this toy company owner who lives in this penthouse, and he basically has this woman who's cursing out him for her son, I think, dying, or her son killing himself because of unemployment or some problems that this owner guy caused him unintentionally. And she's like this gypsy. She casts this magic, or says that, there's going to be a curse on him, that she's going to get her revenge one day. And then all of a sudden, the toys that this guy owns and creates may or may not start coming to life and acting out that revenge. Very creative, very fun short story, and the ending was sweet and to the point. So yeah, there's a lot of great stories in here. The Lawnmower Man's one of the weirdest, most erotic, most freaky, most strange stories I ever read. It still makes me smile as well. You have The Ledge, which is a very realistic story, very well written. You have Quitters Inc., which was super dark, super deep, that deals with addiction and the horrific ways that a company can manage to make you break that addiction. Fantastic short story collection overall, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, I would recommend this one 100%. This is my favorite horror short story collection out of all the ones that I read so far, and it's my favorite horror book in general that I read so far. It's what inspires me to get into writing. It's what inspires me to read, and I think Stephen King crafted a masterpiece when it came to this. I haven't read anything from Stephen King so far that touches this book, and yeah, one of my favorites of all time. So those are my top 5 horror books that I am grateful for, and that's to celebrate this Thanksgiving holiday. Let me know down below, what are your opinions on my list? Do you agree or disagree with me? Have you read some of these books, and what are your thoughts about them? What are your top 5 horror books that you're most grateful for reading and checking out, and why are they so? Let me know in the comments. And again, it's Thanksgiving. Show me that you're grateful. Hit that subscribe button and hit that like button down below. It's free, and it lets me know you guys are supportive. It lets me know what type of content you guys enjoy and what you want me to start making. And yeah, that's all I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Happy Thanksgiving. Spend time with your family, friends, and loved ones, and make sure to be grateful for all the great things in your life. And I'm grateful for you guys. Thank you to my community that got me to over 100 subscribers. Thank you to all of my peers that are reviewers and Goosebumps YouTubers, and the guys on the Discord. I love each and every one of you. You guys are like my homies, my siblings, my best friends, and I love getting to talk about the stuff that I enjoy with you all the time. And yeah, I've been blessed and grateful to experience this. And hopefully in the future, this journey keeps on going. We keep growing, we keep getting bigger, and the content keeps getting better. And I get more and more connected with all of you guys. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and happy Thanksgiving. Deuces. No, seriously. That habanero chili powder and the boxers, I mean, for real. Listen, I may or may not have been talking to some chicks, but listen, man, when you start thinking that I'm cheating on you by, you know what I'm saying, collecting Serena Vincent posters, that is not cheating, all right? That's just my own infatuation, okay? With Power Rangers, I'm a big Lost Galaxy fan. Also a fan of Serena Vincent's other films. But that's just my appreciation for the art. That's how I represent that. And it's nothing different than if I had a, you know, like a poster of a car or a poster of R.L. Stein on the wall. That's nothing different, okay? Now, I don't want you to hold a black light to the posters. That's not really none of your business, but that's just my opinion, all right? But till this day, man, till this day, I cannot watch Lost Galaxy without my package going. Even the lighter doesn't want to show it. If this lighter flicks one more time, I swear to God, I'm going to start screaming in pain because this is hard to bear through. And speaking of that, this video is done. I have to really run to the bathroom. Next time, she should have just went with jalapenos. I mean, seriously, habaneros, really?